Okay, so like a genius, I managed to delete the video that I shot of my finally getting a working RGB cable made up. But yeah, in a nutshell, yet another plug, yet another faff, this time doing each pin one at a time and then letting the whole thing, very, very quickly dabbing the solder on, not pre-tinning the pins in the plug because that put way too much heat onto the pin and caused the plastic to melt on the other two. I had to drill out the hole in the back of the case to fit the shroud on that plug. I didn't have a smaller box to fit the little bit of strip board that I used for the circuitry. So it's a rather oversized box there, and then that goes up to the SCART plug. The SCART plug has the 180 ohm resistor between pins 8 and 16, I'm going to say, off the top of my head. I'd have to check that up on the circuit diagram. But all the rest of the circuitry, because I didn't have any nice small 10 volt caps, there was no way to get them all into that SCART plug. So in the end, I used a little bit of strip board and divided the board into 3 zones by cutting all the strips across in 2 locations, trimming it down so that it fitted widthways into this little case, and then from the mini DIN end, the Sega end, it gets soldered into the first zone. Then there's a 75 ohm resistor on each of the cables that then goes into the middle zone. The middle zone then also has the positive leg of the capacitors, which then go to the third zone, from which is soldered the cables from this section, which then goes out to the TV. So you've got the negative leg of the capacitors facing the TV. They're 75 ohm resistors, 220 microfarad capacitors. As I said, I only had 16 volt capacitors. If I had little 10 volt ones, I would have put them all into the SCART plug. Fiddly though it is, it's a lot neater than having this whacking great box. As I didn't have a smaller box, the actual circuit board is only about this size, so it's a bit overkill. You only need the resistors and caps on the RGB and sync lines. Of course, doing the sync cable was what prompted all of this in the first place. All of the ones that you can buy online, apart from the made-to-order ones from, I think, Retro Cables, the company name is, unfortunately, they'd run out of their lovely, beautifully built, quite expensive, but well worth the money cables when I called. So I was left having to make my own after all. As I said, didn't have small enough caps, so I've ended up putting them on strip board and then tidying them away in there, and then it's all hot glued and whatnot. Yeah, the hole, by the way, I don't know what size Sega made it, but in order to fit these off of eBay mini DIN plugs, because that shroud has to go inside the case because the socket is actually quite a long way back inside, you need to mill that out to 14 mil diameter. But once that's done, that's all good, and that finally works. It's all tested. So one thing I have found, Micro Machines really doesn't like the Motorola being overclocked, and in any case there's absolutely no need. Most people don't even bother with that mod, with the clock mod. The only advantage it's in certain racing games and Sega Spinball here and there is known to freeze up the controllers and get really jerky on the screen, because the Sega chip is waiting on the Motorola to do a lot of the logic. So being able to switch over to 10 megahertz is quite handy. But as I said, Micro Machines, certainly Micro Machines 2, really hates the Motorola being overclocked. And of course that's the pause, so that's on run at the moment. So you can pause when you switch over the clocks, which is always a good idea, otherwise it's almost guaranteed to crash the game. A lot of games just don't want to run with a higher clock on the Motorola anyway. And then here we've got, that's Japanese, that's US, and that's UK, so that's PAL 50 megahertz, that is 50 hertz, English, and then that's NTSC in English, and that's Japanese and NTSC. The back. So we'll start on PAL. We've got Micro Machines, the original one in. I did try this same video using Micro Machines 2, but for good or for bad, with Micro Machines Turbo Tournament 2, and I suspect therefore Micro Machines 96 as well, the most obvious sign that you switched over to NTSC is that all the music and sound effects speeds up in Micro Machines 1. But I think because of the extra joystick ports and so on, that they've actually put a timing crystal specifically for stuff like handling the joystick ports and also for the audio, the music. So you don't actually hear the music speed up. That's fine. The game itself still runs 20% faster. It's lunatic. It's absolutely hilarious. But it's not quite such a spectacular demonstration of the system switching over. So I've gone back to Micro Machines 1 here. And I've also got a really crappy Japanese game that I use just for testing the dimensions of the slot to make sure that I've got the slot dimensions right to physically fit, because you can see it's a very different profile. Hang on. There you go. As you can see, they're very different profiles. To the top one is the European region, and the bottom one is the Japanese cartridge, which is why you have to open up the slot to get the cards to fit. That was the main reason, but I wanted to test the Japanese language settings, and that's when I found that it didn't work. Cartridge was claimed to be tested, but it's actually DOA. Fortunately, going over it with contact cleaner, cotton buds, one of those vibrating electric toothbrushes that I use, those cheap ones, they're brilliant because they don't move the head much. It's literally just a vibration, so it's perfect for loosening dirt without actually whacking into components and joints. It doesn't place any mechanical stress on the board. It's almost like ultrasonic cleaning, really. Very effective and works quite well. Anyway, get a thorough going over. Fixed the language wire on here because I'd found that where I'd soldered it, I've mentioned in a previous video, the actual track started to come up. It kept pulling away. This time I scraped a lot more track back and soldered further up, so that there is unbroken track sort of downstream for a little bit as well. That helps provide some mechanical protection, as it were, from the whole thing trying to lift up. Once I've got that soldered on and tested, I then gave it another good thorough globbing over with hot glue, and it now works. Hooray. Anyway, so yeah, always clean the cartridges. That usually saves them. This was my friend's 96 cart, which is basically Micro Machines 2 with some extra tracks. Yeah, unfortunately, at some point in its history, I thought there was a possibility maybe when we put it into the machine when I went over for his birthday to show him the machine and sort of play a few games of Micro Machines, maybe that was it. But from the burn damage to the back of the board right underneath one of the chips, we would have smelt that. In fact, we probably would have seen the smoke from that, and it certainly would have smelt it, because the scorch damage was quite serious. Anyway, I gave it a thorough clean up, and I put this in, and it will actually boot through the copyright checks, but then that's because that's on the ROM, not on the logic chip. And I think it's the logic, the thing that actually then handles stuff like the joystick and whatnot, that's screwed on this. So unfortunately, the chip is so damaged that it will run when it's stone cold for a few seconds, but then as it warms up, that's it. So that cart is toast. Right, let's fire this one up. So that's now showing RGB. As you see, all nice colour correction. When I first tried the cable out, I was only getting blue. It was just horrible blue. You could just about make out the graphics, but that was all. I couldn't work out why until I realised that it was that the plug simply wasn't going in deep enough into the socket, because the hole in the case of the Sega isn't big enough to take that plastic surround of the plug, which is why I milled it out, and that sorted it out. So the cable's good, as you can see. It's beautifully crisp. You can see every pixel outline. It's one of the things. It's one of the. A lot of the enthusiasts like using old CRTs where they can get them, because the very nature of CRTs gives it a kind of natural dithering that makes it look, much better. Now, obviously, I've got this in widescreen. The actual image should be in 4:3. I can switch the TV over, but it's hardly a big deal. Although, actually, you know what? Let's go for authenticity. Right. So here we go. Let's see. Hang on a minute. Just going to pause. Okay, there we go. So that's in 4:3. That's looking a little better. Now, watch what happens when I switch over to US motors going up. So you'll notice, hopefully, actually, if I do that again, you can see this. With this one, you don't really notice the letterboxing. With Micro Machines 2, you get really pronounced letterboxing in PAL, but you don't notice the music change. With this one, you don't really see the letterboxing here, but you get the 20% faster music as the whole game is running 20% faster. Basically, as it was designed to be played, instead of at the snail's pace that we got in Europe and the Australasian markets. Right, so let's go. I won't be able to actually play anything because I'm holding the phone up with my right hand and can't really play one-handed. I'm not that talented. Hang on a minute. But at least I can get it started. So I'm going to put it back in PAL. Right, so that's system pause. Now let's see if I can get my fingers on the right key. Yeah. Right, I'm just going to put it back in pause. Now, oh, it didn't like that. It did not like that. Let's try switching it over using I wonder. No, does not like that at all. Nah. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to power that off, and this time I'm going to boot in NTSC mode, and I'm just going to pause the video while I go through the same setup process. Okay, let's see if I can get that to focus. There we go. Yeah, that was a bit of a momentary spaz attack there, and I couldn't work out what was going on. I thought, oh, great, there's a problem. Turns out what I'd done, like I said, it doesn't like the Motorola being on 10 megahertz. When I hit the mechanical pause, I must have accidentally hit that tab as well, and managed to put it in 10 megahertz, and that's what caused the screen to go all funny. But let's try this now, and you'll see the difference in speed, hopefully. If I can just get a bit of a lead so that I can switch it over. Right. Now you see the difference in speed there. Okay, so watch that speed as I switch it over to NTSC. Yeah, good fun. So it speeds it up quite significantly. It makes the game rather more challenging, actually, which is quite fun. Right, so, okay, that's enough of that. So, now, that was PAL and NTSC with an all-regions game. Now, I could switch over to Japanese in that, and it would run perfectly well. It does, but what's the point? It doesn't demonstrate anything. So, one rubbish Japanese cart. As you can see, fits nicely around the edges, just perfectly. Now, let's switch to Japanese at the back. Won't boot otherwise. Turn start on, and here we go. Reads the ROM, and there we go. Ah, yeah, there you go. Oh, damn, rotate. Come on, rotate. There we go. Anyway, it's a really, really rubbish game, but it's basically like their bad attempt at Tetris, making it more difficult. But anyway, as you saw, it had the Japanese language appear very briefly, although they've used English for most of it, rather annoyingly. So even this you can't really tell as well as tell you what, let's just lose the game. Yeah, it's a bit annoying, that, really. I was hoping there'd be more actual Japanese in it. I saw it briefly, but wonder. Okay. Ah, yeah, there we go. Yeah, so you can see they've used a lot of English in there, but the instructions are in Japanese, so you can see it is a Japanese cartridge. Yeah, seems quite happy to run. So there you go. I'll turn that off because it's such a crap game. So that's one modded Sega Mega Drive 2 SCART cable, an RGB with the sync sorted out. Quite happy with that for a first attempt. And there's a lot more experienced people that have done a lot better jobs than me. So yeah, that's why there's no comments on this, because frankly I don't need to hear it. I know that it's a pretty amateurish job compared to a lot of people online. But then that's the point. I just wanted to show people that, yeah, even an amateur like me can do it. If you can literally know which end of a soldering iron is the hot end, it doesn't even have to be a particularly good soldering iron, as it turns out. You just need to be patient and diligent with your diagramming so that you know what you're doing, and yeah, it all works out in the end.